remember to do so. I'm Michelle Aaron, the director of the festival. It's been quite a challenge this year to move for our 6th one online, and yet we've done it. It's been very different and, as I said, a challenge, but it's also enabled a lot of things. It's meant that we've been able to bring in incredible people from around the world, the kind of voices and the directors that we wouldn't necessarily have been, well, have had the funding to bring to the region. So we're so grateful to have everybody taking part. It's a festival that specializes in social justice. And on this, the last day, we've had an earlier film today that was very much about generational trauma, if you like. And I think this evening is also touches on and is in very many ways focused on the same kind of theme. The film last night was in many ways about loss as well. And it occurred to me that it's been interesting this year that there would be a sense of reflection, more reflection than we might normally have in the festival, as this is a year of greater reflection. I must do a final thanks to Anya Ostrowska, who has been an incredible festival coordinator. Definitely couldn't have done it without her, and definitely couldn't have done it without her calm voice during the last few days. So finally, I am going to hand over to our panel. We always program a Palestinian film, so I'm so glad that it's a Palestinian film that will close the festival this year, and that on the panel we have a Palestinian director as well, who directed the film that opened the very first Screening Rights Festival in 2015. So there's nice harmony this year. But I'm so grateful for all the panelists. I will hand over now to the chair, Anandi Ramamurthy, and I just want to say a couple of things about Anandi. She's a professor of media and culture at Sheffield Hallam University. She's written extensively about colonial and post-colonial experience and images, both in the UK and much more widely. And she is, by the end of the year, I believe, having a short book on Palestinian cinema called Struggling to be Seen, that should be coming out by the end of the year, and maybe she'll tell you more about that. So I'll hand over to Anandi now. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Michelle. So I'd like to, oh, have we lost Leila? I think we might have lost Leila at the moment, but hopefully we will, Leila will return to the discussion. So, but let me introduce Lina Al Abed, the director of the film IBRAHIM, A Fate to Define. And Leila is back with us, Leila Sansour, the director of Open Bethlehem, which is not just a film, it's really more than a film, a campaign, as well as the film Jeremy Hardy versus the Israeli Army. So I'm going to, first of all, ask Leila to give a few reflections, personal reflections of hers on the film to help start the discussion. Leila, over to you. You need to unmute yourself, Leila.
Sorry. Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So sorry about that. Yes, I really connected with Lina's film, not only because of her personal story. I also, my last film featured my father as a kind of inspirational force for me. My father didn't die in the circumstances that Lina's father died, which I think is hugely dramatic. But nevertheless, he died young. He died, I think, in grief about the Palestinian cause, the inability of his generation to resolve things, that sense of despair at what's happening. And I think maybe now Lina and I belong to a generation that really has to reckon with the fathers. I mean, I would say the mother. I would say the mothers. It's just that mine and Lina's situation as the fathers. But we have to reckon with the previous generation. And I think in liberation struggles, what a generation means to the next is very, very important, because we sort of acquire our own energy and our own positioning regarding the cause, depending on what journeys they had, what did they achieve in their journeys, how they failed. And unfortunately, our generation has to process a result of a very, very committed struggle by one generation that didn't yield any positive results. We have to process this, and it's a very, very difficult thing to process. And I find it even more difficult sometimes to process the idea that we too might leave this to the next generation ourselves. So I think this is a discussion that is bubbling among Palestinians today. Many of us, I am part of so many discussions about what to do, the sense of despair about how to continue. Sometimes people start attaching values to previous generations, like did they do the right thing? Did they do the good thing? Did they fail strategically? Were they bad people? Did they take wrong decisions? And I was quite impressed by the fact that Lina didn't just go for a simple way of dealing with her father figure in the film, that she allowed herself to go through a strange journey where she explored what really in a kind of maybe honest detail, what her father's story had as an effect on her and also on her siblings. And I suppose so. My first question to Lina, and I would like to hear that. What do you think? I understand this journey was a very long journey for you. So maybe two questions, in fact. One is, how long was this journey with this film to make it? How difficult was it? But also, what did it do to your relationship to your father and maybe to the cause itself through this journey?
What's the last question?
The last question is, what did this journey of making this film leave you with as emotions or thoughts about your father's journey and about the previous generation and about the cause, the Palestinian cause in general? And I suppose big questions, but maybe you might be able to answer them.
So the journey, it has been like 7 years. It took us 7 years since I decided to make the film, and then I start writing, preparing, and it took 7 years. How difficult it was, the most difficult things that, even my mother in the beginning, like she was all the time, because it has many years, so I was already living in Beirut. My mother kept visiting me from Damascus every year, and every time since 2012, so I filmed with her till I made the main shooting in 2016. And in the beginning, also the friends of my father, so most of them, the feeling, the atmosphere was like they don't really want to go back on this journey. They don't want to really look back to the past, which is I totally understand, because it's on two levels, on the personal side and even in the political side, with who my father was, what kind of organization. They are very powerful, less powerful, of course, the organization, but there is still many files still open in a way, we could say. And which is I totally understand, because even for me, that I was the one that I decided I want to open this door again and I want to go through this journey. There was moment it was very difficult, because it was meaning if I'm facing this moment, it's like you're facing your nightmares or your the monster that has been hunting all your life. What's the third question again? The third question was how it's relieved me now with the memory of my father. It's really relieving, like the feeling and all, and after all what I have been learned, and the main things that it's not really about the end of the journey or the result of the journey. It's about the journey itself, which is also, took me years to realize. I do really live in peace with his memory. Like my feeling was as if I just burned him, and it was for sure it was sad, but I didn't. It was not really dramatic. Like I have been seeing myself all during these years with my family, my friends, my partner in the work, all the other our co-production. So it was very very nice closure, let's say.
And if I can ask, and for your family, how did your family receive the film?
In general, يعني, they all like it, but there was different reaction. Of course, my mother, she was too emotional, like because she started even like to cry, like it was the first 3 minutes, so she was already like emotional charged. But like in general, they all like it.
It's a really moving film, Lina, and so sensitive. And I would really like to sort of echo those thoughts that you know, Leila reflected on it in terms of the way in which you actually tackle the past and the kind of lack of judgment in the film. And this very much was sort of almost like a detective style story that we go through as you kind of uncovering more and more. And we see the different responses that your siblings and your mother have had in order to kind of cope with the trauma. And what I really felt that the way in which you tackled it, I think that there's a connection and a sort of an affinity that even people that don't know much about the particular sort of the Palestinian cause, but are families that have dealt with various kinds of trauma, that there's a real sort of connection that that they can feel in terms of how people cope in these like completely extraordinary circumstances. One of the things I really noticed, and it struck me partly because in dealing with a family member who's quite unwell, and finding ways to talk to them in order for them to be more relaxed, it tends to be in the process of doing other things. And one of the things I really noticed in all the interviews was that you were cooking or standing in a shop. It was always those kind of almost chance moments. It wasn't like anything formal. There was always something else that was happening to make it more possible to actually speak. And I wondered whether this was a very conscious decision that you made, or it just happened, or yeah.
No, it was because mainly, like I said, I don't want to make a sad film. But of course, I know that my story is very sad. So I was thinking, like, I don't want to let people with me in the film, the family, the friends of my father, the relative, like, just to put them and to shoot them. So what we can do. And then, like, I found with cooking, where it was possible to do this, it's somehow like reflect this very simple details in the daily life. I mean, we're talking about huge things like absence for a man, family, absence for a homeland, but by showing it in this way, like in a way as to say, like in the end, we're not victims, we're just survivors, which is a huge difference, in my opinion, especially after 70 years from this struggle, and after all huge archive from television, series, drama, how the image of the refugee will be.
Sure. I did notice that the last interview, though, with your uncle, or you know, who which was a more sort of problematic relationship.
Yes, my cousin.
It's your cousin, okay. So he was kind of pinned on the sofa. cornered on the sofa, which was very different. And you just kind of really felt that in terms of, how it, how it comes across, visually. How did you, I noticed in the credits that all the funding was Arab funding, and I wondered whether that it had not been possible, so like Europeans were just not interested in you covering the story, or what, how that had happened really.
I think that's right. They all, yes, but like, for example, Screen Institute Beirut, yes, it was mainly in Beirut, but the main funding was from the Danish. But there was no, we have been like try to apply to many things. So the option B was try to finish this long process as independent also filmmaker, me and my partner Rami Nihawi. He was the editor, the co-writer, the main producer, of course, and the main DOP. So the first option was like we found, we know our friends in the region somehow, which they work in the same domain. So it was like a good way to make this connection. And then we apply for money fund. I think what has been more interested, yes, the Arab funds. But mainly, yes, maybe, I don't know what's, I wouldn't call it what's the problem, but in the end, it's all about what their interest, what's now the, I don't know how to say it in English, like what's the fashion now, or what's the trend, let's say. So sometimes, and yes, this is for somehow, in my opinion, it's not really very fair in this system of the funding. Like, because like when you apply, it's not when you get refused or get, they took your project. Sometimes it's not really depend like that your file or your film, it's not good or not interesting.
It's just about what the
it's
desire at that moment is. Absolutely, absolutely. Leila, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Do you want to come back in? Have you got another question for Lina? Or
well, I mean, I have a lot of questions for Lina, but I was wondering whether we don't want to involve the audience now. Do you think? Or
yeah, sure, we could. Do you want to ask one more question and then we'll open it up?
Yes. I wondered where you've shown the film so far, and whether you feel that the audiences at different places where you showed it were very different in their reactions. Also, maybe a slightly more political thing. How do you feel people respond to the fact that your father was part of the Abu Nidal group? What does it cause in terms of discussions, if it does, among the audience when they are part of maybe the Palestinian society that know maybe more about the groups, the different groups?
We screen it in many places, like for sure the main things, like when you screen it in a European, for example, country, it's totally different when you screen it for Arab audience, because it's many details will be different, how they will get the reaction. But mainly, for example, last year with Palestinian Toronto Film Festival, so the audience mainly they were like Arab and mainly Palestinian, and it wasn't really the problem that my father he was with this organization, more than there was some people they do not really agree with me how I speak about Palestine in total, how I deal with all of this big cause, and what I have said, what my brother said. It was not easy for some of them, but like in the end was the general atmosphere that they like it. I mean, because in a way I was trying to speak with this, I remember this old Palestinian woman, and she was looking at me, going to cry and tell me, how could you say it in this way? And I said, because like we're trying to say it in different way for so many years, you know, just try to look like
Yes.
me with really make this reconciliation, to look back to ourselves and say it that we were ugly too as well in some
Yes.
part during all of this
Yeah.
years.
So let's.
I think it's a strong part. So I was just going to say that I think it's a very strong side of your film. And I do understand very well what you're saying, that I think often Palestinians of the diaspora, they fire and live with a much stronger kind of romanticism of everything, when in fact maybe we've arrived at a point where we have to be very honest, and there is a slight difference and tension between being in the middle of it all, where your life is directly affected by whatever happens to the cause, or whether you live abroad and you just invested romantically in the cause, and I think it creates a very, very different relationship to it.
I agree.
Sorry.
So we'd love to open up the discussion to the audience. So if you want to either ask your questions or type them in the chat, whichever you feel comfortable with, but it would be great if you actually, or if you don't have a question, but you just want to reflect on the film, that's also fine.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, and is it okay if I kind of just make
yes, please
comments?
do. Yeah.
Hi, I thought that was a wonderful documentary, Lina, and I want to just pick up on something. Really, it draws from both what Leila and also Anandi have said, that your film really does have reach beyond the Palestinian cause and the diaspora. So as somebody from the Armenian diaspora at the moment with the situation in Artsakh, there was so much from your film that kind of resonates for me, and also the burden that you carry in terms of, if there is a family narrative of who you are, what you represent, and what you should be living and dying for generation after generation. You know, so if I go back 3 generations, my great-grandfather was a Fedai fighter, and there was a big name around things that he did in his time, but there was also a reality within the family which wasn't so different to yours, even though it's over 100 years ago, where he was separated and estranged from the family because everything was the Dashnak party. Everything in his life was all around fighting for the cause. And interestingly, the women were left to kind of try and pick up the pieces. You know, at one point he was in a jail in Libya. The family all went there as well. Then he escaped off. Anyway, long story. My grandfather similarly lost everyone in the genocide of 1915. And then he took on this position, like a heroic position, of joining an Armenian division for the I think it was for the French, to fight the Ottomans. Then my father, then me. And I'm in a situation now where all I feel is a heart sink of seeing young Armenians going from the diaspora to the front lines fighting, and any talk which isn't just about viewing the Azeris as the enemy, it's just not permitted. You know, so your film was so very powerful for me at this particular time because of the honesty. And I thought it was really, really courageous to be so honest. And I think unless we have more of these kind of honest discussions as to these you know, very difficult kind of topics and disputes, there never will be any chance of a future, you know, whether it's for the Armenians, whether it's for the Palestinians. I just wanted to really, really thank you for again,
thank you so
everything
much.
you put into that film. And it's one I will no doubt be watching a few more times, I would say several more times, because I think it will be a film that each time I'm going to learn something, not only about you and your family and the Palestinian situation, but also about myself. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Hallam. Would anyone else like to come in? And I think Sarah is connecting. Does anyone else have a comment or question that they would like to ask? So Lina, let me ask you what your plans are for the film. It came out about, about a year ago? And you mentioned that you've been screening it quite a lot in the Arab world. So is it now just recently being screened in further, you know, in Europe and the US, or what are your plans?
Yes, but it's most of the festival, it's online. But it has been, last month it has been screened in DC, Palestinian Cinema Days in the USA. And next month is going to screen in Catalonia, Barcelona. And yeah, and nowadays it's screening in Latin Arab Film Festival in Argentina. And yes, at least I has been lucky to be able to screen at least online.
Sure.
With this strange situation.
And have you got any other projects that are coming up? Next further projects?
I cannot hear you. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Have you got any other questions that are coming up? Any other projects that are coming up that you're going to be working on?
Nothing.
You're enjoying working with this film at the moment. Absolutely. Michelle, do you want to come in? Have you got a question to?
Yes, it was kind of connected to further future projects, which you've just talked to, but it was specifically about this idea of such an honest filmmaking and such a kind of, well, you make yourself so vulnerable in the film in a way that you've obviously, you know, have felt and have needed to feel in order to sort of finish the film, as you said to us earlier. And I just wonder, how do you make another film? I mean, what is it? Is you're saying that you haven't got a project in mind? I don't want to make you even more exposed, but I guess I'm saying, how do you, if you found a style of filmmaking that is obviously so powerful and so effective, and I know that you've won at least one award so far, and it's justly claimed. I'm just wondering, how do you think you can translate that kind of filmmaking style that is so vulnerable, honest, but so politically important because of its honesty in the way that Alan said? How do you move on? How do you find the next project?
Thank you so much, Michelle, for what you said. But honestly, I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking, like, there is, I don't know, maybe that's why it's also it took a while, but in a way, my feeling that I'm slowly a little bit how I express myself, my reaction. But yes, for a moment, it's not really think of any full clear idea for next project.
I'm just wondering if I could come in again. Is that possible?
Yes, of course.
Is that okay? I'm going to kind of have a go at answering Michelle's question from a different perspective as an audience member. I'm also a clinical psychologist, and I don't want to turn it into like a group therapy way of thinking about things. But I suppose I look at filmmakers as really you're pushing beyond people's ways of, established ways of thinking about things. And I still feel this about Leila's film, Open Bethlehem. It's still ahead of its time. Your film is going to be the same, Lina. I think we would need 10, 15 years as an audience to be able for it to sink in the messages. You're the trailblazers. You're taking things forward. You're providing a vision, a way of thinking about a situation. Now, if it was in psychotherapy, we'd be saying, look, let's hold this. Let's hold this. We don't need to move on anywhere. Now it's just time for the audiences maybe to kind of see the work that you've done and process, and gradually, hopefully, some of the new ways of thinking that come from watching your film, Lina, and also Leila's, her other work. It's going to create some and generate new ways of thinking of the situations. So that, I don't know, just going back to Michelle's point, I don't think things need to move on so much. Let's hold what we've got here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the advice, Alan.
Ararasi.
Well, maybe if I can ask a very simple question.
Yes.
I really noticed, Lina, that you were knitting a lot during the film. Knitting.
Yes.
Yeah. And I did wonder, like, do you knit yourself, or was it something that you decided to have alongside making the film? Like you felt it said something about the journey itself? Why?
No, it has been like 8 years, usually in winter. Yes, most of the year, but some year, like I will make 30 hats for my friends. Some year I will make only 8. So, but it's every winter. I did not start yet this winter. Let's see. Maybe I found something else. I found it very like I'm not really.
Well,
I don't know,
because we might be in quarantine for a long time.
Yeah, for example, I think we will, if this is going to be like this, I think we should find something. Yeah, many things with the knitting, not only knitting.
Lina, we kind of lost part of that. Can you just repeat?
Yes, I will try to change the internet. Just a moment. Yes, it should be.
Can you hear us?
I think we've lost Lina.
Yeah, looks
Have
like.
we got Leila?
Yes.
Yes, I think so.
I sort of, I had another question, which it sort of feels unfair to ask without Lina being there, but we can ask it again because it was to both of you. I know that you had mentioned in a previous comment about the film Leila, that it feels to be very much emblematic of a generational shift in Palestinian, maybe Palestinian experience or Palestinian diasporic attitudes. I don't know if you want to say something more about that, but obviously I can't help but think how your film Open Bethlehem navigates the, you know, the political, the urgency of the world understanding about the occupation, whereas Lina's navigates the urgency, which is a different kind of urgency for Palestinians and diasporic Palestinians to reconcile themselves with the ugly details, with those kind of tricky political points. Is that a generational thing, or is it a mood? Is it a, you know, however many years on from of increased conflict, etc., and Trump and you know, what is that about, do you think?
Well, I think it's only natural that when you sort of a generation that maybe is closer to the first response to an injustice, they fire with a lot more belief in that they can achieve things. They have fire kind of, you know, under their belt. They are romantic about it. They're willing to burn everything in front of them in order to achieve the goals, because the goal feels so noble, so major, and that, you know, it kind of consumes everything. Then I think the following generation, once that generation kind of is gone, but left a big gaping wound after it, with no good results, has to really start thinking about it in very different ways. On the other hand, it's also very difficult. I mean, I think this motion in any cause is obviously cyclical, because a new generation on one hand sometimes does try and process kind of what happened to the previous one, but often also just forgets and starts with the same romanticism again, which maybe is merciful that we forget, because otherwise if we can't forget the mess, I mean Lina showed the situation where that a lot of us had to look at, you know, the mess that is created among us by having to fight this fight. I mean, it also transforms us and often into uglier people. You know, that's the problem. And I think all struggles do mean that we all have to put ourselves to the middle of this mess, and that this mess doesn't necessarily only just makes us into better people. Often also leaves some broken things behind. And I think that, yes, I mean, Lina's film is emblematic in that way. I think because my generation, at least I think, kind of took the baton from the parents, ran with it, but now we have to look at the whole field of mess behind us and an emptiness that is where we are today. So I think the honesty that Lina brought to the discussion, I think is very, very important, because this is the time for us to try and be honest about ourselves. I mean, Anandi also said that, and I think it is a time where we should really find a way of synthesizing both the romance we have towards our cause, but also look at it with the real eye of with a critical eye, you know, and with just complete openness with ourselves. Yes, and sorry, Lina, I'm taking from your time. I think you're back now, so we should hear more from you, I think. Mm-hmm.
Michelle, do you want to repeat the question so that, yeah.
Sure, Lina, I had asked to both of you, but Leila was able to answer first. I was asking about the shift from her film, which is very much sharing an urgent message to the world in a very kind of, I think, politically important way, even a politically palatable way for the global audience, that is about the urgency of understanding what's going on and the occupation and the wall, etc. And yours represents a kind of new generation. And I was wondering whether it was about a new generation or it's about a current mood. I mean, how would you describe it? In what ways do you feel like your film is that you are of your time and of your experience now, generationally? is that to do with kind of what's been going on in Palestine and how the world geopolitics around Palestine? Yeah, how do you feel about your film in that way? You mentioned the old lady saying you mustn't talk, right? So I'm wondering, is it a generational thing?
Yeah, I think I found it always in this way, like as if you're trying to catch the history, as if you're trying to catch this catch, like to really understand all of that period, because in a way or to another, it's affect my personal life. It's affect my personal choices in life as well. So like, yes, so for me, it wasn't like, it was in the same time, like I know that it's a very personal story. It is my father, the Palestinian, blah, blah, blah. But in the same time, I could feel it that, and because I know like, I know that there is many stories like this. Maybe probably there are also not Palestinian, but like for, if we are talking about absence, then it's really, we have many we can share in the world, and between all the human, like we can share all the story, and it's all in the same time. It's very personal, but in the same time, it's very global. So for me, it was like as if I'm trying to understand the story of my father, at the same time, the story of my home, the word home. And it was all like I started to do it already while it's 2012. It was already like the Arab Spring, of course, but mainly the Syrian revolution was already happening. And like I was already not there. I was in Lebanon, but I think it's also affect in a way like you try to change something, to understand more what's really what more option we have in the future. Mm-hmm. If I don't want this copy, like if we can't change it.
Yeah, one of the things that really struck me, I mean, Leila was talking about the romanticism of generations, and then perhaps eras when there's more reflection and disillusionment. And in your film, it was very touching in terms of like your mother, when you asked everyone where they thought home was, and your mother speaks about that being in Syria. And I think your brothers and sisters all talk about the various places that they're living, but it was your nephew, or, you know, I think it was your nephew who says home is Palestine. So that belief, in a sense, and whether it's romantic or not, that the political belief of return, in a sense, is still there. And that's very heartening to see, in terms of, even with all the complexities and the difficulties and the tragedies and the trauma, that there's still that in the next generation, whether romantic or not, at least there's that drive to struggle for a future. I found that there's a very, very powerful moment in the film.
Yeah, because I think we might be able to forgive in a way, but you will never forget, no?
No, absolutely.
What will happen, even if the situation like this or worse, or like imagine we will really reach a very fair peace agreement, which is, I don't believe in reality we will get this. But in all cases, you cannot really forget all of this history.
Absolutely.
I wonder, Anandi, if I can ask you something, sort of carrying on from what I asked the others, is because you have been very immersed in thinking about Palestinian film over the last few years, and I know you've done work with the archive and etc., and work with Film Lab, etc. I just wonder for you where you might place Lina's film, whether you're seeing it as generational, whether you're seeing it as diasporic, when, yeah, how you're seeing?
Well, I would say it's very much part of a series of films by this generation of filmmakers that do, in a sense, use the trigger of their family, of their parents' past, in a sense, political past sometimes, and just the experience of exile as the sort of the pin for their films. Of course, Hind Shafani's film Trip Across Exodus is another one. There's a filmmaker in Australia who's been trying to make a film about her father, and this idea of return, coming back to the place of, you know, where her family came from. So those kind of, in a sense, I suppose we can see them as like, well, they're intergenerational stories, and so the personal then stands for something that's much, much bigger. So there are a number of filmmakers who are doing that kind of work. I have to say, I think Lina's film is a very strong example, because of the openness and the sort of the lack of judgment with which she approaches, you know, the subject. I was really deeply moved by it. And interestingly, I saw it first in a year ago in Palestine at Film Labs Festival. I was quite tired at the time, and I enjoyed the film, but I took it in on a much more literal level, and then I got a chance to watch it again a couple of days ago, and it's watching it again, it actually really builds for you the beauty of it. So I think that's, you know, it really is a remarkable achievement.
Thank you so much. There is any question from? Yes.
Well, if no one has any more questions, shall we leave it there? Leila, is there anything else that you'd like to pick up on? Or?
I mean, maybe just one last question to Lina. I was quite intrigued, like having your background. You also managed to visit Palestine. I wasn't sure how you managed to go in, but also interested to know how do you connect to Palestine? Do you think do you like to go back again? Do you like to live there for a short time? Like, I know that you have a very complex identity and very understandable, but how did you feel about your journey to Palestine and your relationship to the place, the geographical place now?
Well, to be honest, like my passport is Jordanian, which is, it's not very hard to go, but like you apply always for permission and they don't give it to you. That's reality. Like I get the first permission in 2012, and that was the moment after I visit for the first time Palestine. That was the moment that I want to start this journey, and then I was lucky to take it 2016 during the main shooting. But for sure, I would really love to be able to express how to live there, because like in all my life, I'm going to be 40 soon, and I spent less than 1 month in Palestine, which is only like, of course, in the 67 land we cannot go around, which is like I have been never like in a situation where I can be at least really express the feeling. But for sure, I would love to live there. Maybe, to be honest, I would not say like I will go and I want to die there, for sure, no. But at least to be able, like as any normal, not Arab people, to be able to visit your land. Yani.
Yeah, I understand.
Hopefully soon.
Hopefully.
I apply for permission. Yeah, like you apply.
We wait for you, Lina. We wait for you in Palestine. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Lina, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's really late in Beirut, but yeah, we really appreciate you spending the time.
Not at all. I really enjoyed the talking, and thank you so much, ladies. All really.
It's okay. And Leila, thank you to you as well for all
Thank
your
you, everyone. Yeah.
reflections.
And Anandi, thank you so much as well, Anandi, to all of you. That was a wonderful way to end the festival. It's always fantastic to have a discussion on Palestinian film, and this year has been no different. And also to have so many, we've had a lot of women filmmakers this year, so I'm really glad about that. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for attending the festival this year. Thank you again to Anya, the great festival coordinator, and there she is waving. And I am going to close the event now. Good luck to you, Lina. I hope it goes really well. Can't wait to see whatever else you end up making.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.